everyone, welcome or welcome back. If you're new here, my name's Nina. I'm a life transformation coach, and today I'm going to be answering the question, why is it so hard to change, or why can't people change? I love this question, and of course it's a question that I get all the time, and I think the desire to change is really universal. I don't think I've ever met anyone who didn't want to change at least some aspect of their lives. However, why does this not happen more? Why don't we actually make changes? And I think in most cases, this question has an extremely simple answer, and that's that we have a fear of suffering, and we have a perception that there's going to be suffering along the journey in order to be able to create this change in our life. Or maybe we've started in on this goal and we realize right away that there is hardship, or there are challenges, there are obstacles, and we are simply unwilling to give what it takes in order to complete this goal. So I think that's really the first thing. And unfortunately, this is really where most people stop. They, realize there is some kind of suffering attached to this goal, and then it all ends. We don't want to go any further after that. But we have to really consider another aspect of suffering, and that can come from the cost of not reaching that goal or not making that change in our life. Because if we have a goal, we have a reason for wanting that goal. We have a desire, or it's something that is really necessary in our life or necessary to improve our life. So if we think about it, we can see in a lot of cases that there is a ton more suffering that's going to come by not reaching this goal. So it could be a negative health outcome. It could be a negative financial outcome. It could be something that really threatens our self-esteem. We feel badly about ourselves, or we're just not taking our life to the next level. And there is suffering that can come from all of these things, or anything else that you can think of that is associated with not reaching that goal. And that's something that we often don't consider. So if we're looking at really a scale of suffering, we can see that, yeah, there could be some suffering that comes along the way, or some perception of suffering, and we'll talk about how we can work around that in a moment. But we can also see, if we give it some critical thought, how much suffering is going to happen when we don't reach these goals. So thinking about that is very important. But I can tell you for certain that the answer has nothing to do with the inability to change. It's not that we can't change in almost every circumstance. It's that we don't change, or we won't change. So oftentimes we tell ourselves that we can't change, but that's never really the case. There are, extenuating circumstances in, some cases, but those are really very infrequent. Most of these limitations are self-imposed limitations. They're excuses because we don't want to endure that suffering or that perception of suffering. So let me give you an example of this. I have a client who is a wonderful single woman who really started liking this guy at work. She liked him for quite some time. She really was hoping that he would ask her out, and eventually he did. And this was, of course, a very happy thing for her, until she realized that eventually this guy was going to have to come to her house. And she is a self-described slob. She is a very messy person. She lives in a cluttered house, and this is something that she, firmly always said that she could not change, that it was impossible to change. This is just who she is. Now, this became very apparent that it was not true when he was going to come to her house for the first time to watch a movie, and she was able to clean up the whole thing in like a couple of hours. There were no more pizza boxes. She was, able to get all the dishes done. The counters were all cleared off. She even scrubbed the toilet, everything. It came very easy for her because the suffering would have been greater if he was not able to come to her home, if she was not able to pursue this relationship with him. The suffering that would come from having to clean the house, or to get it organized, was much less in comparison. And that's kind of what we want to think about. What is going to incur more suffering? And usually the suffering that is greater comes from not making that change in our life. And if we can get honest with ourselves about that, we can help ourselves to become more motivated much more easily. So that's the first step. The second step is to really take that perception of suffering and transform it, to reframe it into something more positive. Because our emotions and our feelings and our perceptions really shape our behavior. So if we are able to think more positively about the journey to create this change in our life, we're going to have a lot easier, of a time being able to continue on with that journey. So let me give you an example of this. So I have another client who was very, very unhappy with her weight. This is something that she's been upset about for a while, and finally her doctor told her that she really did need to lose the weight because he could foresee some negative health consequences coming in the very near future. So for her, it was very simple to understand that the suffering that would come from these negative health consequences would be far greater than the suffering that she would experience, changing her diet or going to the gym. She could easily see that the suffering would be more if she didn't address this issue finally. But also what we were able to do is to help her think more positively about, having a healthy diet and going to the gym, and to reframe it into something that she could be excited about or look forward to. So we thought about all the different ways we could do that, and we thought about all the positive associations we could think of for that. And she ended up, starting to feel excited to create new recipes, and she realized how good she felt when her body was moving and when she was seeing, her weight change and her health improve, and she started to really create this positive association. Something else we have to understand about motivation is that motivation does not just come from inspiration. A lot of times motivation comes from action. So once we take action, if we actually get to the step of taking action, we gain momentum, and it becomes very easy to be inspired and to stay motivated, because we can see change, we can see the end result, we can see ourselves working towards this goal, and the ball is rolling, rather than just sitting and waiting for enough inspiration to make that change. In fact, I have a whole video about that. I will go ahead and link that down in the description box below. So really, we have to think of this as kind of a three-step process. So being honest with ourselves about what the perception of suffering is about making that change, and then thinking about the cost of, not making that change, and realize that this goal is important enough to pursue and to endure, maybe some potential suffering if that is so the case. And if there is suffering, to learn to reframe it into something that is more positive, into something that doesn't really feel like suffering anymore. And we have to know also that once that ball is rolling, and once we start making a habit of something, it becomes second nature. It doesn't matter if something is easy or difficult. Once we're used to doing it, we go on autopilot, and it becomes very easy to stay on the course, because that's what our body likes to do. It likes to run on autopilot. It doesn't like to think about anything. That's why you can drive to work and have absolutely no idea how you got there, because your brain was just on autopilot. And if your brain had its way, it would do that with every single thing. So really, once we have a habit in place, very easy to stay on that path and to make that change in our life. But please know that it's not that you can't change, it's that you are not changing. And so it's just really being honest with ourselves and getting to the root of why that is the case, seeing if it's important enough to you, knowing your why, and then really shifting our perspective about the whole thing. And if we can do these things, change becomes a lot easier, and we become a lot more open to change, because we don't necessarily associate it with suffering. We don't have to cling to our comfort zone, because we can see the positive force that change can really make in our life, and we start to really enjoy the whole process. So I truly hope today's video was helpful and interesting to you, and that you are able to start implementing change in your own life and start creating the life that you truly want to live. So as always, I want to thank you so much for spending time with me today. I hope the rest of your day is extraordinary. Please become a subscriber if you aren't one already, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Have an amazing day, guys. Take care.